my baby. I don't know long time. My baby.
So first off, Dean Beasley of NestEgg.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me here. So I'm Dean from NestEgg. We're basically a startup that began about a year and a half, or about 2 years ago now, at the Dutch Blockchain Hackathon. I'm American, and I have another colleague that's American. We have another Dutch person on the team. And the way we got started is that at the hackathon, we were actually approached with the question, what would the futures of pensions look like? If we were to think of the technological developments, the changing in societal politics, how can we be secure in these changing environments, and what would that security look like? So that's what we began about 2 years ago, and so here's kind of the journey that we took. I'll take you from the beginning with the fundamental question. What exactly is a pension? To break it down really simply, it's just saving for the future. We put aside money today, buy bonds, stocks, and other types of assets, with the hopes that the economy would be much better in the future, and we can sell those assets and buy all the things we need, such as the energy for a house, transportation around town, and what have you. But we're coming to an interesting point where a lot of variables are changing, and there's not quite the safety net designed to keep the safety that we've predicted upon in the past. So for example, traditionally, the way we used to work was much simpler. You would go to school, you get your job, you work your way through the career, you get promoted, and at the end you get a nice retirement paid for by your company. But the times are changing, and the way that work is also changing. Today, people have to be much more flexible in the way they earn their income and the way they sustain themselves. While people are being able to be much more adaptive to the changing times of automation and picking up all these different odd jobs, such as maybe driving an Uber after work, or picking up a second job on the side to earn some extra cash. And while these solutions are very dynamic and creative, and they show the innovation of the human spirit to adapt to the times, our safety nets aren't able to accommodate this sort of lifestyle very easily. And if we're going to be taking these types of risks and being entrepreneurial and trying to go out there into the world and build these new things, we have to be comfortable in knowing that we're not risking our future retirement if we want to have the confidence in doing this right. So you've already heard some solutions today where they're talking about how to use blockchain to manage switching your pensions from one to the other. But this is another approach in which we can make an individualized pension, as in giving you the tools to build your own sort of security on your own. So how do we do this? How do we future-proof pensions? The NestEgg model is a little different. Instead of investing in the stock market and other types of assets, we think people should directly invest in the infrastructure of the city they live in, whether that's new solar panels and windmills being deployed, things like self-driving cars which are coming onto the market sooner than you think, and even to go a little more futuristic, delivery drones and the ability to have goods delivered to you with almost no cost. These are the types of infrastructure that's coming our way, and there's an interesting ability for people to be involved in this new deployment. So what do I mean by that? Well, to understand this new technological evolution, so to say, we have to understand this in the stages of how our economies are revolving. So we began, for example, with the first and second industrial revolutions, as empowering our entire societies by coal and oil. To do this, our entire infrastructure and our entire society is based around these concepts, or around these types of fuel, the energy that we use. And now we have this exciting opportunity in 2018, and it's already in motion, of what happens when we begin to switch over to a new energy source. What happens when green energy is the baseline for how we power everything? Well, there's a lot of interesting effects that take place. Very beginning, the sun doesn't charge an energy bill. So once we've deployed this new infrastructure, solar panels, windmills, and these types of things, we no longer have to pay a monthly cost to maintain the actual ability to get energy from these devices. And once we build on top of this energy source, all the rest of the items begin to become a little bit cheaper as well. Self-driving cars, which are powered by your house or the solar panels, aren't having a fuel cost anymore. And the ability to move things around, such as transportation and goods in your society, also reduces price when you have free energy. So we have a really cool opportunity here for the individuals to both participate in funding this infrastructure and for it to have long-term positive effects in reducing our cost of living and giving us new types of infrastructure which give us opportunities that we couldn't do before with oil and coal. So cool. Sounds nice and sounds kind of fun, but how do we actually pull this idea off? How can individuals be at the forefront of this type of industrial revolution and actually begin building themselves? So as you see here, we have a flowchart of how NestEgg is planning to deploy different types of new infrastructure. So I'll take you from the beginning. We have a user who wants to invest in the future of green energy. They think that they could do so by reducing their energy bill and purchasing some shares of some solar panels. So what they do is they find some others who are equally enthusiastic. They use their social media magic and their influence to get people excited. And then they participate in a crowdfund which builds this new type of infrastructure. Once that's built, we strap on some nice technology, some IoT and some blockchain magic, and that begins to generate some energy tokens. And the cool thing about this is because we're on the blockchain, we can do some really cool automation. As this energy is being generated and being accumulated, we can use smart contracts to automatically distribute that energy directly to the owners in proportion in which they own it. And in doing so, the user has a new choice. They can use this energy to reduce their energy bill directly from their investment, or they can reinvest it and maybe buy a few more shares of some more solar panels and further reduce their energy bill, hopefully one day bring it down to zero. And we think this type of model can be used not only for solar panels and green energy, but for the other types of cool third industrial revolution technologies that are coming along our way. So, to build this, we obviously need people to build the infrastructure. If we have the crowdfunding mechanism to finance this new type of revolution, and we have people pumped up, ready to purchase their own shares, we also need people to build and to maintain these types of infrastructures. Because I think, as everyone might know, sharing things is nice, but if you have no one in charge to make sure what's being updated and when, things tend to get left unattended. So you still need people in charge deploying and making these new technologies, but we offer them another proposal. Instead of going directly to a bank to get a loan to try and build these types of infrastructures, in which then after the loan, they'll be selling the energy at a premium to make back the cost they took from the bank. Now this time we're saying, hey, instead of going to the bank and paying a loan that you'll pay back over time, what if we gave you the money up front? The crowd is willing to pay for all this solar panel, and in return, they want to share the production. So if we'll pay you for your labor, for your maintenance, and maybe even a share of the production, let's say a few percentage of the energy produced from each solar panel, that could be a new revenue model for these infrastructure providers. They're not taking the risk of deploying and making back their loan. They have the funding up front and can be secure in building things. And in return, the consumers will be able to get their energy delivered without a premium because they're the new owners. So we have a way of financing how this new technology can be made. We have a way of incentivizing the builders to actually get involved and start creating things. So then how are we actually managing these stuff on the back end? And how can we get people to trust that these new infrastructures are theirs and not being manipulated by some foreign company? So that's where we bring in the blockchain. You guys are here to kind of figure out all these new technologies and how it has an impact on this today. But what we would like to do is actually hide a lot of the complications and a lot of the user experiences of blockchain behind a dashboard so you don't have to worry about it. See, we're interested in blockchain because it gives us a lot of really exciting features like transparency, automation, and also be able to deploy in different countries. But you as a user don't necessarily care or need to deal with that. So what we try to do is we use the blockchain to record the entire source of truth of all these assets. So when your windmills or solar panels are generating energy, you can track that in real time, and you don't have to rely on a foreign company. You actually have that data, and anyone can check on it and ensure that things are going correctly. But we make sure that we can hide all those functions, so you're clicking buttons on our dashboard, and it does all the blockchain transactions in the background. So you have both the validity and transparency of it being on the blockchain where it cannot be manipulated, but we try to make it a little bit easier for you because we realize not everyone here wants to be Satoshi Nakamoto. So, as I said, here's the benefits of why we're doing it. So as I said, we have automation. If we send a lot of this information, a lot of these transactions to the blockchain, we don't have to run this through our backend. These contracts and executions, such as the dividends being paid and crowd funds and who owns the actual shares of ownership, is all on the blockchain real time. This reduces our overhead and makes sure it's autonomous. It's transparent, and what's most important is upfront compliance. So you might be thinking, if we're deploying new infrastructure and people buying shares of these types of assets expecting to get a dividend of energy, that could bring up some complications. So how can we be sure that we're doing this legitimately and being proactive in ensuring this is being done safely? And so what some cool things we can do with the blockchain is also add upfront compliance, which means that we can create a list of rules, such as only allowing these people who have registered their names with a certain authority, and then only those people will be allowed to trade tokens with one another. And this is something we can enforce at the protocol level, meaning instead of hiring someone after the fact to double check everything and making sure people are following the rules, we can code these rules into the basic way the system works, and it's impossible to break those rules. So if someone tried to come into the system and, let's say, take a few tokens and send it to an exchange and sell them, that wouldn't even be possible because their account wouldn't be whitelisted. So we can do a lot of the complicated and costly compliance measures and actually code them into the local installations, which really makes this more cost efficient. And then, lastly, we're going into a more sovereign era, which means that we want to give people the ability to have access and own their own data. Instead of relying on a foreign company to be completely in charge or custodial of their data, they will have the option to actually take this data and do with it as they need, and participate without using NestEgg. And we think that's a very important feature to be going into the next century. Cool. So, very last, we want to realize how are we actually going to pull this off? We have a lot of cool concepts, we have a lot of cool incentive mechanisms, but how are we actually going to get solar panels on the ground with real people? So what we're doing right now with NestEgg is we're focusing on local installations. And what we mean by that is we're going to a very specific location, and we're trying to figure out all the necessary variables and complications that come up to ensure this one single location is completely sustainable. We're creating the code and the automation to ensure it operates without needing our overhead. And our hopes is that at the end of this process, we'll be creating a template that we can use to copy and paste in any house that wants this type of service. So instead of having to figure out multiple times different ways of doing something, we're going to create a model that works at the local level sustainably. And then after that, it just is a matter of who wants to win because it works at the smallest level and can scale as many times as you want to copy and paste this idea. So right now, actually, we're actually building solar panels right now. So we're in the process of installing some really cool technology, like an IoT sensor that tracks the amount of kilowatt hours being produced and creates tamper-proof tokens in correlation to each kilowatt produced. And this lets us take these solar panels and digitalize them in a way that lets us manage the administration, such as who gets what dividend, all autonomously. So we have this panel being installed on a colleague's roof right now. We're doing the appropriate testing, and we'll be having live data coming back soon. And we hope to be running our first pilots coming in November. So if you guys are interested in being part of the energy transition and getting a share of your own solar panels without having to actually put one on your roof, we're accepting sign-ups right now at nestegg.eu/solar. And we encourage all of you guys to check us out and give us your feedback. Thanks.